Silent scan. Silent scan.
Defiance.
Bants and Bants.
You can't control us.
Bants and
A frightening dystopia.
Bants and Bants.
Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Open your eyes.
Bants and
An alternate reality. We begin as wanderers, and we are wanderers still.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Bombs and Bants with John, Mark, and the Missus. I'm John, and with me, as always, is Mark.
Hello.
And the Missus.
Greetings, humans.
We'll cover 3 stories on this week's episode. Up first, I'll tackle a very inconvenient Alps glacier history. Then, the Missus will tackle the new imperative: red states must become sanctuaries for the Bill of Rights. And wrapping things up will be Mark, talking about 38 snubby ammo. We'll also hear from this week's sponsor.
It's SpaceX this week, isn't it?
It isn't,
Oh, man. I really want free rides.
but it's bigger.
Is it Oprah-sized big?
It's deep state insurance.
That is big.
It's all coming up on this week's episode of Bombs and Bants. Let's start things rolling with me. And this article from What's Up With That. If you're not familiar with What's Up With That, that is the world's most viewed site on global warming and climate change. And they are just a little bit skeptical overall. This article is a very inconvenient Alps glacier history. Top glaciologists, Alps were ice-free 6,000 years ago.
Back when we were driving all those SUVs.
Yes. That's one of the things that's interesting, is that the Alps were ice-free 6,000 years ago when CO2 was much lower than today's levels. Studies have shown that 6,000 years ago, things were a lot warmer.
I'm just going to go with dinosaur farts.
There you go. That could be it. And so and so this is just another story that kind of indicates that global warming isn't quite the scary thing that the left would want us to believe.
The other thing you look at 6,000 years ago is the planet overall was more hospitable to both human and animal life. Most of the areas today that we consider to be desert had only just barely started into their the whole process of becoming the dry deserts they are today. So there are much more lush grasslands there, more lakes and rivers. The Sahara, for instance, still had vast tracts of grassland and lakes at that, and the Middle East was better suited for agriculture.
Oh my God. Just attacked by a dog.
Well, every time I lean back in my chair, my dog assumes that that's an open invitation for him to jump on me. And so I lean back and it's always, surprise, dog.
And going back to climate change, one of the things that we are learning is that we don't understand what causes these changes in climate very much at all. As we were talking before we kicked off the show, Mark, you mentioned that some of the newer models really are showing that humans don't have nearly the impact that they originally thought.
Yeah, that's correct. And I apologize to the listeners because I don't remember the name of the committee that the UN has that
The IPCC
governs these models. But they do have different generations of models, and the more recent ones are actually taking into account things like clouds and the impact clouds can have on the temperature and climate, as well as solar forcing has started to show up. And with that, what you see is a reduction in the impact that comes from human activities.
Exactly. And the other thing I know is that before the next ice age comes, the hipsters will all die out. They're going to die before it's cool. All right. On that note.
No, before we're done.
Oh, okay.
I have a question for you. How many climate change scientists does it take to screw in a light bulb?
I don't know.
None, because who wants to screw a climate change scientist? Besides, light bulbs are really small.
Oh, okay. Since we were talking about the Alps, what do you call a podium that has crossed the Alps?
I give up.
A Hannibal lectern.
Oh, no.
It always comes back to cannibals with you, doesn't it?
Well, I guess that would scare the Romans more than anything now. Oh, one thing before we move, I would note that there was an article I saw today of the snowstorms and cold that has hit some areas of the Sahara as well as in Saudi Arabia, and they were noting that some of these mountainous areas in Saudi Arabia that have had below freezing snow, it's something they've had snow in about 50 years.
Must be climate change.
Obviously.
All right. Well, we'll kick it off to the missus.
No, we won't do that first.
Oh, right. We have our commercial. We have our sponsor.
How could you forget the deep state? You're in trouble now.
I'm in trouble now.
Get ready to get canceled.
All right.
If you disappear, poof, in a big puff of smoke, I'll know what happened.
Now we'll know.
Yep.
And it was Deep State Insurance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm married. Could you do that for me? Really? Oh, yeah. I'd like that.
Who are you talking to?
Jake from Deep State?
Jake from Deep State? At 3 a.m? Give me that phone. Who is this?
Jake from Deep State.
What are you wearing, Jake from Deep State?
Khakis?
Well, she sounds hideous.
Well, she's a guy, so...
Well, Jake from Deep State, prove that you're from Deep State.
Your last text from your friend Sue says she's having an affair. You last used your credit card to buy a 6-pack of tequila spritzers at the 7-Eleven, and you watch way too much Netflix late at night. How many times can one person watch the same episode of Friends anyway?
Oh, well, I guess you are from Deep State.
See, I told you. Deep State has gone from indirectly controlling the government to actually selling insurance. They say that since they already know all of our secrets, they can give us the best deal. The other bright spot, they can take the premiums directly out of our bank.
Deep State. We know everything because we've seen everything. We're in control at Deep State.
Well, that was a good commercial.
We already know all your secrets.
Yeah.
Might as well be your insurance company.
Well, after that commercial, we turn it over to the missus for her article, The New Imperative, Red States Must Become Sanctuaries for the Bill of Rights.
Righto. By Stacy Lennox from PJ Media. So here's the gist of it. Stacy Lennox writes that states with Republican-controlled governments need to use their state governments to protect the Bill of Rights, most notably the Second Amendment. She says in the article, we didn't make the rules, but it's high time we start to play by them. So we're all familiar with the leftist sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants. The feds can't come in and arrest them. They won't even keep them on, that's foolishness that we've all been through. And this has actually been upheld by the courts. So Lennox says we have to do the same thing, mostly notably for the Second Amendment. Now, I would add on top of that, especially given recent events and activities, that we need to include the First Amendment in that as well. Include the First Amendment in that
Exactly.
as well.
And I wrote about that yesterday.
We'll do share.
Well, my thought was, and I stole this entirely from Poland. What Poland has done is they have made it a crime to unfairly censor people off of social media. So if people are not violating the law, she's throwing the ball to the dog and it's distracting.
Well, the dog is distracting me because he wants me to throw the
Okay.
ball.
So Poland has made it so that if Twitter or Facebook kicks you off social media and unfairly censors you, it's €1 million fine per individual event. So what they've essentially done is they've taken and they have outlawed censoring people for saying lawful things.
Well, we could do the States, but looking at the Congress and the incoming president, I'm not so sure that we're going to have the rights to say anything that displeases the cloud people much longer. I mean, they're already talking about making MAGA rallies illegal as a form of domestic terrorism.
And that's just truly frightening. That is literally the worst abridgment of the First Amendment I've really ever heard of in the history of our country, if they follow through on that.
Yeah, no, they're going to try to do it. I fully support a law like you were just describing. That's probably the best way to rein in what's happening. It need to be a little nuanced. Obviously, if you've got people taking comments off their blog because they're spam or something else. You don't want to get them caught up in that type of thing. But I think especially for services like Twitter or people that are offering web hosts, that would be a great first step.
Well, one of the things when I wrote about it, I made a couple of exceptions. If Auntie M wanted to make her own knitting site and somebody wanted to talk about Marxist theory on her knitting site, yeah, she could ban those sorts of people. And because she has a single focus for her blog or for her news board. But if you have something that's really general purpose like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, kicking people off that for unpopular opinions in the world that we live in today, I mean, those are not absolutely 100% necessities to have, but they greatly influence the political dynamic.
Well, I've read a couple of arguments about these that I thought were pretty good. The first of which is that these are common carriers. Mm-hmm. It's like the phone company or the railway. Amtrak can't kick you off the train for wearing a t-shirt that says F the police.
No, but they could kick you off the train if you wore a t-shirt with a naked person on it.
Right, because that's obscenity, and obscenity is different than other protected speech.
And I think that would be the same for Twitter. If Twitter wanted to ban people posting nudes, which I don't know that they do, they could.
One thing that comes to mind is that Facebook and Twitter may actually want to be regulated as, similar to, for instance, how the telephone companies used to be, where, you had one telephone company and it was a utility, considered a utility and so forth, because what it did is it protected them from competition. If they have a true monopoly and they're treated like a monopoly by the government, then they literally will be the only place in town to go for that that type of service that you want. So we can't put aside that there may be other reasons other than wokeness for them suddenly trying to cut everybody off.
Well, one of the arguments that you often get from especially people on the left about this is, well, these are private companies, they can do what they want to, like you said about Auntie M and her knitting site. And while that is true, there's another side of that argument too. And I was just reading another article, and this was about Simon & Schuster canceling Senator Josh Hawley's book contract. One of the commenters on the article said they read the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which is the part that prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. So this commenter said, since political affiliation is not on that list, it's perfectly fine to discriminate against conservative. But here's why he and so many of the leftists are wrong, and what they miss about this is that you can't really separate legality and morality. While they are two different things, you do have to consider them together. For example, in the history of the US, there was one time it was completely legal to own another human being, perfectly legal to own a person, right? However, it was completely immoral. And if you want to stand up and say, I'm an American and I stand for freedom, then you have to stand for the First Amendment and freedom of speech and expression, because even if it isn't codified in law, it's the moral thing to do.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Well, and from a legalistic point of view, I that commentator or commenter had is suspect, because when you get into the law on civil rights litigation, the law applies not just to specific discrimination, like saying, okay, I'm not going to hire black people, but and that's clearly illegal under the law, but it also extends to things that would cause or bring about discrimination, even if maybe it wasn't intended or, wasn't so obvious. Like, for instance, a lot of companies used to have tests that they would give to new employees, basically testing, ability, comprehension, intelligence, that type of thing. And most of those were thrown out because they had a disparate impact on minority groups. So if you're going to apply the same reasoning to the kicking people off Twitter or something like that, if you find out that the way that they're kicking people off has a disparate impact on certain groups, so say like for instance white males are more likely to post conservative content that they're going to get kicked off for, then that too could also be a discrimination based on race and sex.
One of the things that I recently read is that AI can pick with a 75% certainty the difference between a liberal and a conservative.
It's my mom again. Yes, it is. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mark. He just leaves you and me for a while.
Okay.
You there, get out of my chair.
I moved into her chair when she left. And now Mark will bring us an article from therevolverguy.com. Mark?
Oh, thank you, John. Yeah, the article I want to talk about has the title 38 Snubby Ammo. And as you indicated, it's from the Revolver Guy. And essentially the article looks into what might make a good choice for ammo selection for if you're running a snub-nosed 38. And I'm sure that all your listeners already know, but just in case, typically a snub-nosed 38 will have a 2-inch barrel, maybe slightly less than that, as compared to a standard barrel length on most revolvers for a duty-sized gun will be 4 inches. So
one of the things that makes me think of, Mark, is that might be a pistol I might buy from a Tyrannosaurus Rex, because he'd be a small arms dealer. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, the fundamental problem with the 38 Special is that it was originally designed in, I believe, 1899, maybe 1898, but it was originally designed as a black powder cartridge, and then very quickly switched to being a smokeless powder cartridge. Like other other black powder cartridges, it has a very, very low pressure that it can achieve. And in fact, in the article, the author notes that the pressure that's been set is by the SAMI organization is 17,000 psi, which may sound like a lot, but it's literally half of the pressure, or about half of what the pressure is for a 9mm load, under half of what the pressure is allowed in like a 357 Magnum, for instance. So quite a bit of difference there. And of course, the problem is when you have combine a short barrel with a very low pressure threshold that you can go up to, is that you just don't get the force that you need to accelerate a bullet to a higher velocity. And with modern hollow points, they're very velocity dependent on how they open up. So if you get below a certain cutoff, say like 1,000 feet per second or 900 feet per second, it's very possible, you'll drop below that and you may not see very good expansion. The author goes into different ways that can be corrected. For instance, they can engineer these bullets to open up at lower velocities, and they can do that. And he describes some of the different engineering techniques, but basically it makes a more fragile bullet.
Talking about that being underpowered, going back through it certainly shows how much more velocity and energy must be carried by some of the other projectiles.
Correct. And, you can do that. There are screaming hot lightweight loads that people have used in the past.
Well, on that note, we'll be back next week with another edition of Bombs and Bants. And thank you for listening. I'm John.
I'm Mark.
And I'm the missus.
Take care.
Y'all come back now, you hear?